Yes, as you just heard, we're reading from Mark chapter 4 today, and it's on page 1430. Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. That day, when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that he was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Be quiet, be still." The wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Lynn. Good morning. Lovely to see you all. I want to speak with you today about your fears, about what you worry about, what you're concerned about. Because Mother's Day, if there's anything that's common to all mothers, it is fear, isn't it? Fear, concern, worry. A Pew survey of more than 3,700 parents in 2022 revealed that across a broad category of issues, mothers consistently had a higher level of worry than fathers. Does that surprise you? Not one bit, right? Okay, good. Now, of course, that's a generalisation, but there's some truth there, right? According to an Australian survey, Mum Power, the leading worries and frustrations for Australian mothers were ranked as follows. Health and well-being of family, 42%. We're worried about that. Day-to-day finances, 40%. Household chores, managing home, 39%. Balancing demands placed on me, 32%. The worries of a mother never end, they say. One mum of older children once said to me, "Little children, little problems. Big children, big problems." And there is some truth to that, isn't there? There are mothers here of children who are now parents. And if I asked you, do you still worry about your children? What would you say? Yes. Okay. It's not as if it switches off, does it? So on Mother's Day, if there's anything that is common to all mothers and all types of mothers, it's fear, isn't it? It's worry, it's concern. Now, of course, that sounds negative. Of course, there's joy and there's laughter and there's love. But of course, that's why there's fear and there's stress and there's worry, right? So today, I just want to take you to a passage that deals with fear, worry and concern. Because here in this famous passage, Jesus deals very realistically with fear. It helps us as we hear and understand this passage to prioritise our concerns. There are three questions in this passage that Lynn just read for us, three questions that beg answers. And so I'm just going to go through each of those questions one by one. The first question you'll see here in Mark 4:38 is this. Teacher, it says in the NIV, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Another version, "Don't you care that we are perishing?" In our church this year, there have been surgeries, there have been diagnoses, there's been relational breakdowns, there's been grief over relationships that don't seem to fix, there's confinement at home and confinement in aged care facilities. Now, I'm almost certain that in every one of those kind of events, there's been this question asked. God, don't you care about us? And don't you care that we're perishing? Well, you see in this account of the storm, this question is addressed to him, Jesus, as their teacher. If you run your eyes over the past chapter and the early part of chapter 4, you'll see that that's what Jesus has been doing. He's the teacher. He's been teaching. He's been teaching crowds. He's been teaching this smaller group of disciples or followers of Jesus in kind of like a small group seminar. And Jesus, the teacher, has been teaching them about faith, about trust, about dependence. Jesus has been saying that if you want to be part of the revolution or want to be part of the kingdom, want to be part of the kingdom that I'm leading, you need to listen to my teaching and accept it in your life. Rely upon it in your life. Now, I think this situation is a bit like TAFE, where Jesus has been teaching. It's like he's been teaching on the TAFE campus, right? But that's only part of the education. Then Jesus takes them out to spend time on the tools. And he's checking whether not only that they were listening, but whether they can actually put into practice the things that they've been learning, whether they can hear his teaching and trust him. And so you see the first line of this story that Lynn read for us. It's in the evening, so it's starting to get dark. And they were already in a boat, so we're not talking the Titanic here. Just imagine something a little bit larger than a tinny down on the Nepean River, right? Like it's not a big boat. And it's the end of a long day of teaching, and Jesus spots an opportunity to rest as they travel across the lake. Now, of course, as the account goes, the wind gets up, the swell rises, they're knocking this little tinny around, tinny. The waves are large enough to come over the lip of the boat, and the boat fills such as these disciples, many of them seasoned fishermen, started to get concerned. Presumably, they started bailing water out as fast as they could. Presumably, the water level is rising too fast in the boat, so their level of resentment is rising that their teacher is sitting snoring in the stern. They couldn't handle it anymore because they were anxious. They had fear. This was kind of like a bare-knuckled, clenched teeth kind of raw fear for their lives. And this is kind of moment you get out the code book and you go ... SOS, right? This is the save our souls kind of moment. They cannot tolerate the teacher sleeping anymore, and they say, "Teacher, do you not care that we are drowning, perishing?" It's one of those questions that's not all that hard to understand, is it? You can't misunderstand what they're asking, can you? We're perishing. Will you help us? In a boat, the fear has reached its fever pitch. It's funny, if you just jump out of the boat with me for a moment and stand back from the situation without the stress of the water rolling into the boat, the writer of this biography of Jesus helps us understand the broader question here with the words that he records. Because perishing is something that is a topic of each one of the Gospels. In fact, it's in the most famous verse in the Bible, John 3:16. That word perish is there. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. The disciples ask, "Don't you care that we're perishing?" And yet that is the precise reason that Jesus came into the world. Jesus himself perishes on the Easter cross so that we could be saved from perishing. Now, our debt towards God is paid so that we don't have to perish for that debt. So out of the boat, it's the question that Jesus answers by going to the cross. Back in the boat, there's a more immediate question, isn't there? With the water coming in fast and the buckets could tip it out, the disciples had a more immediate question. Don't you care that we're perishing? Don't you care that we're drowning? This story reminds me of a story that Kay Cotty told. You might remember the story of the remarkable Australian sailor Kay Cotty, first woman to complete a solo, non-stop, unassisted voyage around the world. And she writes this account of travelling around the Cape of Good Hope in her little 11-metre yacht. She said this: "The barometer had started to drop heavily on 10 April, and by the afternoon of 11 April, we were screaming along at 55 knots. The sea was boiling. The seas were building on top of the already huge Southern Ocean swell. Some totaled 13 metres. It looked as if we were in the middle of a vast mountain range. She says that the boat was knocked flat not once but twice by a couple of rogue mountains of sea. She goes on to say, we were knocked flat to starboard, the mast under the water. The waves had us in their grip and the boat was pushed along on her side for several minutes. Can you imagine? Hear that sound, the wind rushing. You can almost feel the spray hitting your face. You're a boat that's 3 metres wide, narrower than the puros you're sitting on. And you've got these waves that are high as the ceiling crashing down on the boat. It just seems incomprehensible, doesn't it? When sailors get scared, you know something's wrong. Their question was answered. They asked, don't you care that we are perishing? And Jesus said, yes, by his actions. See what happens next, verse 39? He got up. The word used here is rebuked the wind and said to the waves, quiet, be still. Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. The first question asked about perishing is replaced quickly by a second question about faith. And the question is asked by Jesus. The shoe is now on the other foot. Here's Jesus, verse 40. He said to the disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Oh, it's a question that seems a little bit unfair to me in one way. Of course they're afraid. It seems pretty unfair because until you remember, they're at TAFE, right? And this is how Jesus is training his disciples. He's given them the theory, and can they put it into practice? They say to him, do you care? His actions, both now and later at the Easter cross, say, yes, I do care. But then he asks, do you care enough about who I am to trust me when I call you to trust me? Jesus says, I don't want your words. Your words are cheap. I want you to trust me. I was chatting with a bunch of Christian men the other day about freedom, the freedom that we have in Jesus' kingdom. We no longer fear death in the way that perhaps we once did. Knowing that we will live forever with Jesus, not because of what we've done, but because of what he's done. And there is an immense amount of freedom in that. We no longer fear that time of accountability that is coming for all people when we stand before the throne of God, because Jesus has taken away that debt that we owe. But as Christian men, we also talked about the freedoms that we no longer have as part of Jesus' kingdom. One guy said alcohol and lying. That is, when Jesus comes to town, things change. And so the way that I used to live, I can no longer live. I'm turning away from that way of living. A lifestyle of getting drunk with my mates, that changes. Lying, being creative with the truth, that changes. It's off the table. So of course, there are freedoms that these Christian men don't have that are difficult in a range of ways. But the greater freedom is the one that dominates, that freedom from sin, that freedom to walk before the throne of God knowing that your debts are paid for. Because here Jesus says, I want you to listen to my words and follow my pattern of life. And that begins with trusting that I'm in charge of creation. So obviously the followers of Jesus hadn't got that yet. And obviously we struggle with that every week, with our regular concerns, with our big concerns. When we face the death of a loved one before their time, when we face our own mortality, when we face injustice. Are we willing to say, God's got this? I'm not in control of this world, but God is. I entrust my situation to him. I'll take responsibility for my situation, but I recognise that he's in control. Can we do that? Do we say that? That's what Jesus is calling us towards. That is faith, trust, dependence. Because you see, the disciples go from fearing their environment to a far greater fear, a far bigger fear, to being terrified that they are now in the presence of the one who controls the environment. You can see that in verse 41, Mark 4:41. The disciples, they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." I think we can imagine this moment, can't we? Hearing the rushing of the wind, tasting the spray that's splashing your face as you squint through the salty water. In the background, it looks as if the sea is a vast mountain range. And in the foreground, you see a teacher who was formerly standing at the top of the boat teaching people, is now standing at the top of the boat teaching waves and wind. And what's more, they listen and immediately do what he says. The wind and the waves go as quiet as a classroom when the principal walks in. You know, like it's just that immediate change. So quiet you can hear the fish jump. Could you imagine being in that situation? It's really quite extraordinary. Now, it's funny, they don't experience, well, we're not told that they experience gladness or relief, things that you would expect them to experience. And no, it's almost that instead they are struck by an even greater fear, a terror that perhaps, just perhaps, they are in the presence of the living God. Even the wind and the waves obey him, they say in verse 41. Jesus has answered the first question, do you care if we're perishing? The disciples have answered Jesus' question, do you still have no faith? Because suddenly the disciples come to realise that he's not just a teacher. He can't just master crowds. He can master the oceans. Their fears, their concerns, their anxieties of life, even the prospect of drowning becomes secondary. Fear, anxiety, worry are all part of this world, right? But they are secondary to another fear. The Bible says, Psalm 111 verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's not a fear like a fear of ghosts. It's kind of a respect kind of fear that flows from rightly recognising who God is. When we understand who Jesus is, when we understand his authority, all our regular fears become secondary. Our primary concern becomes, how can I live for the one who is in control of all things? These are the questions that we're going to grapple with at the upcoming Christianity Explored course that Nick spoke of before. We'll wrestle with the idea of identity. Who is Jesus? Who am I? What do I do in response to what Jesus has done for me? But it's interesting, by the end of this account here, the fear of the presence of God is the same fear that the Roman guard had when he recognised all that happened at Jesus' death. It's the same fear that the women had when they came to Jesus' tomb to find it empty when he'd been raised from the dead. That Jesus had risen from the dead just as he said he was going to do. So this Mother's Day, we've dealt with the three questions that are in this passage around worry, fear, concern. Don't you care that we are perishing? Jesus came into the world as the Son of God to show that he does care that we are perishing. And the question to those who follow Jesus, do you still have no faith? The challenge for us today is whether we are prepared to have God as our primary concern, Jesus, our Lord, as our primary concern, letting all of our other concerns become secondary to that. Whether we are prepared to have Jesus as the primary authority in our life. And that challenge comes from recognizing that he is in control of all things. And Jesus is the answer to the last question in the passage. Who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? The challenge is whether you can. Be concerned by the primary concern. Not the things of this world, but relating to the Lord who is behind the world. The hymn that we're about to sing, It Is Well With My Soul, was written by a man in a time of intense grief. Horatio Spafford had lost his Chicago business in the fires of 1871 in Chicago. He lost everything. And it was due to this fire that he had missed sailing to Europe with his family. The ship he had missed was the ship that his family were on, and that ship went down in the ocean. His wife sent back a telegram to him with 2 words: saved alone. Can you imagine? So he went to Europe to join his wife at the first possible opportunity. And as he sailed over that spot in the Atlantic where the ship went down, it was this hymn that he wrote. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Why don't you stand, we'll sing.